Hey, Happy New Year, Prairie Lakes. We're really glad you're here. It's the first day and literally like the first few hours of the brand new year of 2023. And so what a great way, seriously, to kick off your new year, just being here with us at church. And so we're really glad that you're here. And let's also recognize this, okay? Last Sunday was Christmas, and we didn't gather physically because we had just gathered the day before, and then this Sunday is New Year's, and so if you're joining us, you might be a little red-eyed from counting down 2022 last night, or maybe you're still squeezing out the last day or two of your vacation, and you're watching from someplace else, hopefully warmer than where we are, but wherever you're at, all right, wherever you're joining us from, we just are sincerely glad you're here. There's not a lot of things that we can control in this life. Maybe this last week has been a good reminder of that for you, but when you can't, with the things you can control, just being here, showing up, being present, God, He just does some cool stuff with that. So good job, okay? Hey, it's a new year, and is it a new year, new you? I mean, are you one of those folks, like new year, new me kind of thing? Because for some of us, that's our mentality. We just can't wait for a fresh calendar because for whatever reason in our minds, the way they work, fresh calendar means it's all the encouragement we need to create some new goals or resolutions, or maybe just reset a few things, New year, new me, new year, better me, that kind of deal. Now, others of us, let's call you realists or cynics, depending on your seat, right? Others of us look at January 1 just like we look at any other calendar day, Maybe we're the type that goes to the gym pretty regularly and we're already bracing for it being like weirdly packed for 3 weeks. Until what? Until it all goes back to normal, okay? So regardless of which camp you're in, here's what I think. I think a new year does provide us with an opportunity, maybe an opening or maybe an openness, just provides us with an openness that we might not have any other time of year. And so let's take advantage of it. We don't want to just let this pass us by. Let me pitch something to you in light of that on this first day of 2023. Here's my pitch. What if 2023 was the year in which you grew in your understanding of where you came from? Why? So that your past could be a window that you look through instead of a wall, okay? What if 2023 was that kind of year? We all have an origin story. All of us have an origin story. There's the family that we grew up in. Maybe it was two-parent, maybe it was one, maybe it was something else. There's the place that we came from, the town that we were born in, where we grew up, where we kind of cut our teeth. Maybe you were someone who didn't have one place. You had several different places. There's the circumstances that we grew up in. Maybe your past was pretty stable and maybe by all things normal. Or maybe there was trauma. Maybe you had money. Maybe you didn't. All of us have some mix of probably all of those in the story that is our past, where we came from. And your past can be either a window or it can be a wall. Let me illustrate this, okay? So your past can be either a window or a wall. First thing here, you can either look at it. If it's a window, you can kind of focus your attention on it. Or if it's a wall, you can just run into it or run up against it. If it's a window number 2, you can use it to gain insight as you look at it, as you look through it. If it's a wall, it's going to get you stuck. Next one, you could see through it clearly if your past is a window. In fact, you can even see forward by looking back a little bit more clearly. We'll talk about that. But if it's a wall, you're not going to be able to see past it, Your past can be either a window or a wall. And you can see this pattern all over the Bible, like all over it. In so many of the stories of the people who interacted with God. So turn with me to Exodus 4. We're going to be looking especially at verses 11 through 13. It's the very beginning of your Bible almost. We'll have them on the screen for you as well. But the beginning of the book of Exodus tells the origin story of a man named Moses. And we get a pretty good snapshot of his past. And as the story goes, Moses was born as a Hebrew slave to a Hebrew slave at a time in Israelite history where Egypt was their captor and their oppressor. And Egypt, because of how numerous the Hebrew tribes had grown, they issued a really brutal decree of killing off all infant baby boys. And but Moses' mom figures out a way to get him, her brand new baby, in the hands of the Egyptian princess, Pharaoh's daughter. And Moses ends up growing up as a prince in Pharaoh's court. But as he grows up, Moses sees what Egypt is doing to his people, and there's one day where he intervenes because an Egyptian slave master is beating a Hebrew slave. And as Moses intervenes, he accidentally kills this Egyptian, and then it is found out, and then he flees, okay? And so God meets Moses out in the desert and basically commissions him to say, hey, Moses, you're going back to Egypt, and you're going to be my mouthpiece, and you're going to be my instrument to rescue the Hebrews from slavery. So here's what God says to Moses in chapter 3, and then we'll get to chapter 4. But in chapter 3, here's what he says. He says, and now the cry of the Israelites have reached me, and I've seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, Moses, go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Now here's Moses' response. Moses said to God in verse 3:11, who am I? What part of my story, what part of my past makes you think, God, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? So then God reassures him, that's not about you, Moses, but it's about the promise I'm making you and who I am. And Moses is like, sure, but what should I tell them if they ask, who's sending me? What's your name? And God says, well, I am that I am. Just tell them that, And then Moses is like, well, I'll tell them that, but what if they don't listen? And God's like, well, show me your staff, And Moses gives God his staff, and he tells Moses to cast the staff down, and it turns into a snake. He goes, show them that. They'll believe you. And if that wasn't enough reassurance, okay, it's comical. If that wasn't enough, we get to chapter 4 now, verse 10. Now read along with me. Moses said to the Lord, you can just, he says, pardon your servant, Lord, but you can just kind of get a sense like, oh, I know I'm kind of pushing your boundary. I'm probably pushing your buttons here. But I've never been eloquent. Neither in the past, nor since you've spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. In other words, God, I've never been that guy. You should have seen me in speech class. It was a disaster. I do not come from a long line of public speakers. And so there you go, okay? So for Moses, his past, what was his past? It wasn't a window. He wasn't looking. It was a wall. I mean, he was running right into it. And it was a wall of his own making, really. There's this story that God's inviting him into, this new, this exciting, this scary, this risky story that God was saying, hey, come be a part of this. But the story that Moses was telling himself stood in the way of him jumping in, of saying yes to that invite. His past was his wall, and it was the story that he was telling himself about himself. And the more he rehearsed this story about himself, about his past, and who he was and who he wasn't, about this insecurity, about his inability to speak, the taller and taller and taller that wall really got. Now, that's one way our walls get built when it comes to our past. It's not the only way. It's not just always us building these things up in our own minds. Sometimes our past becomes a wall because others build that wall for us. Like when Jesus went to call his first disciples. The story goes, Jesus grabs a guy named Andrew. And then Andrew goes and he tells his brother Simon, who is also called Peter. And then Jesus grabs another guy, Philip. And Philip goes and tells one of his buddies, a guy named Nathaniel. And so just take a look at this interaction. This is from John 1, okay? The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, follow me. Philip, like Andrew and Peter, were all from the same town, Bethsaida. Now, Philip found Nathanael, and he told him, hey, we've found the one Moses wrote about in the law, about whom the prophets also wrote. This guy's name is Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Well, Nazareth is what Nathanael says. Can anything good come from there? Come and see, said Philip, okay? Let me just tell you, okay? And I'm not trying to be weird about this, all right? But I feel this one. Kinda. I mean, like, when I tell people where I'm from, I feel this a little bit. Because I'm from Waterloo. And I've chosen to stay in Waterloo, actually. My family and I have lived there for a while. My kids go to school there. And Waterloo has a reputation in our state. And there's other towns that, you know, get kind of lumped in the same category. Fort Dodge, Mason City, Ottumwa, East Des Moines, Davenport. I mean, these are the modern day Nazareths. Yeah. This is what Nathanael's saying. He's saying, I've known plenty of Nazarenes. They're all pretty rough. Because that town's pretty rough. And so that's that, right? Like, like if you're from there, your past is a wall. And you didn't build that. Like, you didn't build that wall up. It's just been built for you. So your past can be, right? That's all I'm trying to say. Your past can be a wall. But the question is, what if in 2023 it wasn't, or it was different? What if it could go from a wall to a window? What if you felt like you could look at it, rather than run into it? You know, what if your past gave you insight rather than got you stuck? What if you could see through it clearly rather than not be able to see past it? I mean, that idea sounds good. It does, but how would we go about doing that? Because I think there's a real reason we don't. That more of us don't. Because the how is I don't know. It's the how is tough. The idea of my past not being a wall is pretty attractive, but what's the process going to be like? Because if that process involves me reliving it, having to think about it, especially the parts I don't want to think about, having to sort through it, much less having to be open about it to someone else, yeah, give them access, be vulnerable and all this, you know, no thanks. You know, maybe walls are fine. Walls are good, actually. Yeah, I might not be able to get around it, but you know what else walls do? They keep other people on the outside, and maybe that's okay, right? So no thanks. Walls are fine, and I think that's at least where a few of us are when it comes to our past. Almost by our own choice. Our past is a wall that we've walled off, if that makes any sense. It's kind of like that room in the house where you keep the door closed, you know, because you know what's behind there and it's a disaster. Or the drawer, right? The drawer that like only you open, nobody else. And when you watch someone else open it, you like almost go to close it right away. Because as long as the disaster is contained, as long as that wall stays up, no problem. Except that it might be a problem. I want to get a little vulnerable with you for a second here, more vulnerable maybe than what I usually am, or prefer to be honest with you. Hardest thing I've ever done in ministry was in 2015, 2016, when I was pastor of our first multi-site campus in Waterloo. And long story short, for a lot of reasons, just it felt like we needed to not do that anymore. And we needed to merge this campus with a church plant in Waterloo that was really aligned with our culture, our mission, but just didn't have our church name. And so we did, okay? And it was absolutely the right decision. And our board at Prairie Lakes was so faith-filled and helpful and sacrificial. I mean, we really invested a lot of money in the kingdom of God in Waterloo and entrusted that to someone else. And it's paid off. It's just been incredible. But it was also really costly for me, personally. And not in a victim kind of way, not in a, oh, woe is me kind of way, but that was a tough thing. I don't know if you ever had to walk through that, closing something down and telling people that was going to happen was tough. And so after it was all over, Pastor Chris Rigg, he made it clear that it was a good idea, right? I'm not telling you have to, but you kind of have to go get some counseling, and that's what I did. That kind of season, he was saying, in transition, merited some time away, maybe some time, just dedicated time in front of a counselor to process it. So I did. I sat in front of a counselor for 5 days in a row. And we sorted through, the campus closure and the merger and everything like that. But then we started sorting through like how it was impacting me, how I handled it. And then we started sorting through why did I handle it in the way that I did. Which then, of course, led to processing my own story and where I came from and my past and some of the things it was tapping into that I thought were mostly resolved and turns out clearly weren't, And I remember this one phrase that over the course of my time with this counselor just was an absolute light bulb for me as I was processing some of this. Because I was saying something like this to him. I was saying like, I feel like I've dealt with that, Like I'm not running from it. Like I'm not trying to hide from it. I'm not trying to say it wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal. It was, but I just genuinely feel like I've dealt with it. And I remember that here's what my counselor said to me, and I wrote it down. He said, I believe you, but, and here's what he said. Just because you've dealt with something from your past doesn't mean that it still can't impact you emotionally in the present. Now, that's like counseling 101. I mean, like, you're like, oh, that's all he said? Yeah, yes, right. I know that. I have a degree in psychology. I took pastoral counseling classes at a master's level, like I know that in concept. But in that moment, like the light bulb went on for me. Like I understood it. Something that just clicked. And it was a turning point in our time together because, even though I didn't feel like I was actively trying to resist what he was wanting me to examine, I just didn't feel like there was a lot. I just didn't feel like there was a lot there. And past is the past. It was what it was. You can't go back and change it. You can only learn from it. And I did, so let's move on. But what I realized is that even if all of that was true, and it mostly was, that doesn't mean that it's not going to have an ongoing impact on me in the present. All right? So if you need to borrow a little bit of that story as you think about this, rather than tune me out, just keep going with me here. Because what I want to do is I want to spend the rest of our time talking a little bit about if we're going to go on this journey, how can we partner with Jesus in this? How can we partner with Jesus as we're taking this journey? Here's the question. Let's just frame it up. How can we partner with Jesus so that our past goes from a wall to a window? That's the question. And we're going to be in John 4 for the rest of our time together. Verses are going to be on the screen for you. And if you got a Bible, I would encourage you to follow along as well. It's one of those stories from Jesus' life that I know we've gone back to a number of times at Prairie Lakes. And I think the reason for that is that it's one of those stories that's pretty easy to identify with, to almost put yourself in. It's the story of Jesus traveling through a region called Samaria, and him having a conversation with a Samaritan woman at the well. And so here's how John picks up the story in chapter 4. Read with me in verse 4. Now he, Jesus, had to go through Samaria. And so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. And it was about noon. And when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" And there's a parenthetical comment there that John includes saying his disciples had gone to town to buy food. So Jesus is there alone with this woman, okay? And then we get to verse 9. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" And then another parenthetical comment, "For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." So this was like 2,000 years ago. Different time, different culture, obviously. And when there's that amount of time, it's hard to transport yourself back to understand exactly what's going on. Why didn't Jews associate with Samaritans? And we got to be careful of the comparisons that we make with our own world today, because they're not always 100% accurate, but there are some parallels nonetheless. I mean, we understand racial categories still. Jews and Samaritans were different ethnicities. Jewish people kind of considered themselves to be pure. They considered Samaritans to be impure, mixed. And so they were kind of Jewish, kind of Arabic. Not as good, okay? So there's a racial dimension to that. There was a faith dimension to this as well. Jews and Samaritans had some significant overlap in their beliefs, for sure. I mean, you can get, like, Jesus was at a spot where both of them would say, that was our history. Jacob's well was our history. But Jews felt like their temple in Jerusalem, their tradition, they just felt like those were the true and more faithful versions of that. True and more faithful to the traditions that God had handed down from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And maybe you know both of those, but it gets even more divisive. And this is why John includes some of the parenthetical comments that he does. It's because of the purity laws. And purity laws, we do not have a concept for that. Pure and impure is not the same as right and wrong or sinful and holy. It's not. It's kind of like clean and dirty. Like, if you get dirty, I mean, you can clean yourself up, but you're dirty. And this is where the interaction that Jesus is having with this Samaritan woman at the well comes into such sharp focus. Because when Jesus asks her for a drink, just really practically, he's asking her to use the same bucket or cup or whatever she was using to draw and drink water. Jesus is going to drink out of the same thing that this woman was drinking out of. And by any definition of Jewish purity, this was absolutely out of bounds. I mean, Jesus was getting himself dirty. If Jesus' lips touched the same cup as the Samaritan woman, he would be impure. He'd be contaminated. He'd have to go through different purification rites to cleanse himself, and so that he could what? So he could be pure before God and rejoin God's worshiping community. And she knows that. This Samaritan woman knows it. She knows it because Jewish people loved making sure that those Samaritans knew where they were in the pecking order, right? But Jesus presses on by essentially saying, don't worry about it. You know what? I was actually the one who wrote those laws, and I can tell you firsthand that's not what they mean. So they continue to converse, and this woman wants to know more about what Jesus is talking about. And so Jesus says this to her in verse 16. He told her, "Go call your husband and come back. I'll explain to both of you, you know." And she goes, "Well, I don't have a husband." She replied, and Jesus said to her, "You're right. You're absolutely right when you say that you don't have a husband. The fact is, you've had 5, and the man you now have is not your husband. So yeah, you're not lying." So Jesus knows she's an impure Samaritan, doesn't care. And maybe for that's an easy one, right? Because racism, I mean, we get that. Racism is bad, you know. We wouldn't expect Jesus to be a racist. But that's not the only thing about her past that might put Jesus off. You know, she's been married 5 times. And now she's just living with a dude. Jesus wasn't confused about who she was. He wasn't surprised. He knew all of that before he walked up to her at the well. And he knew all of that before he started and continued in this conversation. And I have to imagine this, okay? Text doesn't say it, but I have to imagine. I have to imagine that the look on Jesus' face as he was saying all of this to her was one of just like compassion, like knowing, you know? Like when you look at your parents or when you look at your kid and they know and you know. Like I know we haven't met, but I know you. I know everything about you. You do not need to hide. And honestly, you couldn't even if you wanted to. That's the first thing we need to know, I think, if we're going to partner with Jesus when it comes to our past. First thing is this. We have to know that Jesus isn't put off by it. Jesus is not put off by our past. And because that's true, here's the deal. We don't need to hide it. We don't need to fix it. And we don't need to justify it. We do a lot of those things. We do a lot of hiding. We try to clean it up. Or we try to justify it, explain it away, defend it, right? And this is where I think you've got to give this woman all kinds of credit, because rather than what? Rather than be embarrassed or horrified or angry or defensive or whatever she could do, right? When she realizes that Jesus knows, what does she do? Well, in verse 19, she goes, "Sir, I can see that you're a prophet." She just recognizes the truth of her situation in front of her. She accepts it. No hiding. This man knows me. He knows me. And the only way he could know what he knows is if God showed it to him. And even though he knows everything about me, even though he knows everything about you, here he is. Like standing right in front of me. And he initiated, he pursued, he started this conversation and continued into it. He came toward me and he keeps coming toward me. See, Jesus he's just not put off by our past. So what? So we can stop hiding, we can stop fixing, we can stop justifying, we can stop all of that if we want to partner with Jesus here. We get a second lesson in these same verses here as well, and that's this. Jesus can scale the wall of our past. He can scale the wall. Meaning what? It's not on you and me to climb out to him. It's not on us. Think about this woman's story. She's been married 5 times, and now she's living with a different guy 5 times. And listen, no judgment here, in all sincerity. Because lots of us have screwed up. Lots of us have screwed up in our relationships, in our sexual lives, in our marriages. Lots of us have either divorce or remarriage or some combination of both in our stories. So just in all sincerity, right? But this woman, she's kind of on another level, right? She's not quite Elizabeth Taylor level, and if that's a reference you don't know, Generation Z, Google it. Huge movie star in the 60s and 70s. She was married 8 times to 7 different people, and the irony is that after all of that, she converted to Judaism. All right, seriously. So this one wasn't married 8 times, but she's been married 5 times, and maybe going towards 6, maybe not. And you know what? If you know someone that's kind of like that, it's pretty easy to write them off. They're super messy. They seem to make the same mistakes all over again, over and over. Maybe you don't judge them. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't judge them. Maybe you feel bad for them. Either way, it can feel like, man, they're hopeless. People with that kind of past go in that direction for that long, they just don't change usually, right? And they certainly don't command the attention of a accomplished and popular religious type like Jesus. She wasn't going to climb over the wall of her past and start moving towards Jesus. She just wasn't. So what? Well, so then Jesus went towards her. He may have well just skipped over that wall. Yeah, I know that. It's nothing to him. She could have been married 8 times or 18 times, It doesn't matter where you've been to Jesus. It doesn't matter. And this is why Paul says this in Romans 8. Here's what he says. He says, I'm convinced that neither death nor life, nor either angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height of our wall, nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. What does that mean? Well, it means the thing that you and I can't get past, the thing that you can't forgive yourself for, the thing that you feel so deeply ashamed of, that you don't think you'll ever be able to get over. That thing is powerless to prevent Jesus from loving and coming towards you. It may have a lot of power over you. It does not have any power over Jesus. None. So you don't have to climb your way to him. But you do have to accept and believe that he's climbing his way to you. Final lesson, okay? Final lesson as we partner with Jesus so that our past can go from a wall to a window. Verse 39. Many of the Samaritans, this is the end of the story, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in Jesus because of this woman's testimony. Now here was her testimony. He told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he did. He stayed for 2 days, and because of his words, many more became believers. And they said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we've heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. So here's the lesson. Jesus can use the pain from your past, whether it was self-inflicted or inflicted by someone else. He can use the pain from your past for his glory and for others' good. Absolutely can. I love this woman's testimony. What was her message about Jesus? What was it? Jesus died for my sin. Nope. That was not her message. He hadn't even done that yet. That Jesus is the Son of God. Nope, that's not what she said either. What was her message? This dude knew everything I did. He still talked to me. You know, like that's why she was so joyful at that, right? He did? Well, what did he do then? Did he judge you? No. Slapped you? No. Kind of made you feel weird and uncomfortable. Kind of got weird and uncomfortable around you? No. No. He just kept talking to me. And he wants to talk to you too. What if 2023 could be the year in which your past went from wall to window as you partnered with Jesus? Let me pray for us, okay? Father in heaven, thanks for a chance for us to kind of gather together, and however we're doing that on this first day of 2023. God, we just pray that this year is a year in which we partner with you, Jesus, so that you might use our pain for your glory and for others' good. Jesus, we just pray this in your name. Amen.